I'm very pleased during this particular session to invite Peter Diamandis to join us. Peter has been recently named as one of Fortune's 50 greatest leaders. He's the founder and executive chairman of the X Prize Foundation, executive founder of Singularity University, and he's the author of four New York Times best-selling books, including the most recent one, Life Force with Tony Robbins. Peter, it's such a pleasure to welcome you to our program.
Pleasure, Steve. Good to be here.
Let's start by just kind of giving us a sense. I know that there's so many different areas that cutting edge areas that you're involved in, but how did you get interested in the area of longevity?
I grew up in a medical family. My father was an OBGYN. My mom should have been a doctor, ran his office, and it was expected I'd become a doctor. I went to MIT undergrad for molecular genetics, and in the nighttime, I would focus on everything related to space. I was a space junkie. Star Trek and Apollo really lit me on fire. Ended up going to medical school, did a joint program at MIT and Harvard, and after I got my diploma, I shipped a photocopy to my parents and then went and started focusing on my space journeys and started building companies in the space arena, launch and satellite and a zero gravity company, a space university, and pursued space for 30 years. And it was about 20 years ago that I really started focusing in on exponential technologies, how computation, sensors, networks, AI, robotics, and everything going on in biotech had the potential to reinvent every industry. And in particular, it hit me that lifespan, health span was a huge opportunity for disruption. My interest in this area came from two different places. One, from my childhood desire to open up space. There's not been enough progress to make me happy, right? We haven't seen the Star Trek. We haven't been back to the moon or gone to Mars. So I figured, okay, I need an extra 50 years on this planet to at least see the potential of what I desire to see. And the second is just the grand challenge of it all. And I think there's no greater gift you can give than increased health span and no bigger business on the planet. For me, I have a $500 million venture fund called Bold Capital. And we had been investing mostly in exponential tech and robotics and AI, but I've shifted the fund mostly 2/3 now to biotech with a age, and longevity focus, because I think it's one of the biggest markets out there. So those areas, there was one pivotal moment for me, Steve. When I was in medical school, I watched this television show on long-lived sea life. And it was talking about how bowhead whales could live 200 years and Greenland sharks could live 400 or 500 years. And I remember thinking, if they can live that long, why can't we? And I said, it's either a hardware problem or a software problem. And I think this is the decade where we start to make a dent in those problems.
Yeah, so it's a convergence of a lot of very important facts there, including your own interest in having more time here to do all of these exciting things.
Yeah, it's the most exciting time to be alive. So I want to see as much of it as I can.
Right. Can you give us your perspective on aging, like why we age? I know you mentioned hardware, software, but what's your perspective on why we age?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think of it the following, right? And these are the fundamental sort of baseline facts that get me thinking about aging in this way. It's we're all born with 3.2 billion letters from our father and our mother, and we have the same genome really throughout our lives, at birth, at 20, at 50, at 80, at 100. So why do you look different? Why do you age, right? It's not the genes you have. It's which genes are on and which genes are off. Obviously, David Sinclair is a friend, and his theory on, information theory of aging, for me, holds a lot of validity. But it's the notion of making sure that your epigenetic control of your body, of your genome is solid. And it's, the other thing that hits me is that when we were evolving on the savannas of Africa 100,000 years ago, during the time we call cavemen, you'd go into puberty at age 12 or 13. By the time you were 24, 25, 26, you were a grandparent. Your babies were having babies. And back then, before we had an abundance of food, before McDonald's and Whole Foods was around, if nature's mission was to perpetuate our species, to pass on our genome generation to generation, the last thing you wanted to do was steal food from your grandchildren's mouth. So there was a positive bias for an early end of life. There was no selective factors to keep you alive longer. And so we evolved in that direction. Now the question is, can we go from Darwinism, evolution by natural selection, to an evolution by intelligent direction? Can we reinvent the software and hardware of our body? Can we understand the fundamentals? And along this lines, this is where the work that I do in studying exponential technologies really flips my mindset. The realization is we all inherently have a linear bias in how we think. We expect tomorrow and next year to be very much like this year, a little bit of progression, maybe not too much. But the fact is, and I think this is the work that my colleague and mentor Ray Kurzweil has spoken about, we're going to see in the next decade as much progress as we've seen in the past century. That's how fast technology is accelerating. And so I think that we're going to see a disproportionate application of artificial intelligence, and what's coming just after that, that's going to make AI look like it's standing still, which is quantum technologies, quantum computation, sensors, and communications, enable an understanding of biology, which I think at its basis, molecular in nature is quantum in nature. We're going to start to understand fundamentals there. And I think we're going to start adding additional healthy years onto our life. And that brings about what Ray and Aubrey de Grey have spoken about as longevity escape velocity. The notion that there's going to be a moment in time that for every year that you're alive, science is adding more than a year to your life. I had interviewed Ray and George Church for my book that I did with Tony, Life Force, and I asked Ray, when do you think we're going to reach longevity escape velocity? And now Ray's not a biologist, but he is a technologist and has one of the most accurate predictions out there. It's, if you Google his name and predictions, it's like 84% accuracy. And his prediction on when we'll reach longevity escape velocity is the next 10 to 12 years. When I asked George, I expected him to be a lot more conservative, and he was, but not by much. It's like 15 to 20 years. So our job here isn't to live an extra 50 years. It's to live long enough to intercept the new technologies coming in the next 10 to 20 years.
Right. Well, that's we're very close then, based on both of their predictions.